Before we begin, if you love deep mysteries, Appalachian folklore, and stories that make you look over your shoulder at night, then hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel more than you think, and it makes sure you never miss the next descent into the unknown. Alright, let's begin with mystery number 1. I should start by saying, I never planned to go into Dead Hollow. Nobody really does. It's the kind of place people only talk about when the sun is out, preferably with other people around, because mentioning it alone, especially after dark, makes the air feel wrong, heavy, watching. But I didn't believe any of that, not until the night I followed the footsteps. I was visiting my cousin Mason in eastern Kentucky. Near a patch of land the locals swore was cursed. They never said that word out loud, curse, instead calling it touched wrong or the place the woods won't take back. Their phrases were always strange like that, as if the mountains had their own vocabulary and they were just borrowing it. Mason and I grew up exploring places we weren't supposed to. Mines, abandoned barns, old schoolhouses swallowed by kudzu, you name it. So when someone told us about Dead Hollow, our first instinct was to check it out, not out of bravery, but boredom. You know how Appalachia gets in the fall, quiet in a way that feels older than anything human. Fog settling low like breath held between the ridge, the kind of silence that makes you whisper without realizing why. We parked his truck at the end of a forgotten service road, the kind where the gravel has long been replaced by moss. The air was cool, but not cold enough to explain the shiver that started crawling under my shirt the second I stepped outside. Trail should be straight ahead, Mason said, pointing toward a thick patch of trees, but there was no trail. There was nothing but untouched ground, and a single line of footprints leading into the woods. Human footprints, bare, deep enough to show whoever made them weighed more than they should. What the hell? Mason murmured. He bent down, pressed his fingers beside one. The earth there felt softer, like it hadn't quite settled, like it was still remembering the weight. These are fresh, he said, glancing at me. But who comes out here barefoot? I don't know why I said it. Maybe the dusk was getting to me. Maybe the silence was already working on my nerves. But I whispered. They walked in, but not out. There was only one direction of prints. Into the hollow, none returning. We followed them. I wish we hadn't. The woods in Dead Hollow aren't like normal woods. The branches lean inward, like ribs trying to close around a heart. The air gets heavier the deeper you go, as if the forest is quietly exhaling around you. Warm and damp, the ground grows soft, then softer, until every step feels like sinking into something that wants to pull you just a little deeper. But the worst part, it was quiet. Appalachian forests are never silent. Even at night there are crickets, nightbirds, wind, something. But here, it was a silence I could hear, a silence that pressed against my ear. We kept following the footprints, both of us slowing without speaking about it. At some point the prints changed. They weren't deep anymore, not clear. They seemed to scatter, like whoever was walking had started stumbling, dragging, turning around. But the strange thing was, they never turned back toward the road. Maybe they panicked, I whispered. Or maybe something chased them. I didn't say that part. The trees grew denser until the sky above was nothing but vague, colorless haze. The smell changed too, earthy at first, then damp, then something faintly metallic, like old pennies left in the rain. Then we heard it, a single footstep, not ours. Somewhere deeper in the hollow, Mason froze. Did you? Yes, I whispered. Another step, slow, heavy, not trying to hide. It sounded like someone was walking just ahead of us, but the direction shifted every few seconds, like the sound was bouncing off the trees, or coming from all sides. Maybe it's just an echo, I said, but my voice came out thin, brittle. Another step, closer. Mason grabbed my arm. We should head back. His voice sounded wrong, tight, like he was forcing it through a throat that didn't want to open. I nodded, and we turned around, except the footprints were gone. The ones we had followed so carefully. The ones that led us in, they weren't behind us anymore. It was just smooth, untouched ground, as if the forest had closed behind us, or swallowed the path. We didn't walk that far, Mason whispered. We didn't go off the trail. There was no trail, I said. My voice felt too loud in that suffocating quiet. The woods soaked it up instantly. Then the steps began again, this time behind us. Slow, deliberate, following. We run, Mason said. We didn't need to discuss it. We didn't need a plan. Instinct took over like a hand, gripping the back of our necks. We ran, but the forest was wrong. No matter which way we turned, it felt like we were running in circles. The trees all leaned the same way. The ground dipped and rose unpredictably. The footsteps behind us kept pace, not running, just walking steadily, as if the thing making them didn't need to rush. Something moved to our right, just a flicker of shape, tall and thin, disappearing behind a trunk. I didn't hear it move, I only saw it. Then something moved to our left, then in front of us. I grabbed Mason's wrist. Stop, stop, stop. We both stood there, breathing hard, listening. No more footsteps. But the silence felt tighter now, as if the forest was waiting. Then, from somewhere deep in the hollow, a voice whispered our names. Not shouted, not called, whispered. But the whisper didn't echo. It didn't fade. It sounded like it was being breathed directly into our ears, though the air around us was completely still. Something inside me broke then, the last thin string holding my fear back. We're getting out, Mason said, but it wasn't confidence in his voice. It was desperation. We didn't follow footprints. There weren't any. Instead, we moved in the direction the air felt less heavy. It sounds stupid, I know, but in that moment, it felt like the only guide the place allowed us. We walked for what felt like hours before we finally saw the trees begin to thin. Then the sky opened above us. We stumbled out onto the service road so suddenly, we almost fell. Normal night sounds rushed back instantly. The chirping, the wind, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway. It was overwhelming, like someone turning on all the lights in a dark room. The forest behind us felt like a door slamming shut. We didn't speak on the drive back, but here's the part that keeps me awake at night. When we returned the next morning, just to see, we found perfectly clear footprints leading from the road into the hollow, but beside them, there was a second set, larger, deeper, following ours, step for step. And those footsteps, they did come back out, but they stopped right at the edge of the road, facing the direction of Mason's truck, facing the direction we had run, as if whatever followed us couldn't leave the hollow, but waited there anyway. We never returned, but sometimes, late at night, when the world gets too quiet, I swear I still hear it. That single, deliberate footstep. The strange thing about the mountains is how easily they make you feel watched, even when you know rationally that you're alone. But what happened near Black Elk Ridge was different. It wasn't just the sensation of being observed, it was being communicated with, or at least that's what I've spent years telling myself. I was up there working with a small research team, nothing intense, just documenting wildlife patterns for a university project, the kind of job where your days are long, your phone signal is non-existent, and the rest of the world feels like something you faintly dreamed about. Only 2 of us stayed overnight on the ridge. Me and a guy named Carter. He was older than me by maybe 10 years. Quiet, but smart, in the way people who watch more than they talk tend to be. That night, it was just the 2 of us in camp, with the others hiking back down the mountain before dusk. The air was colder than usual for early November. Not dangerously cold, just sharp, like the mountain was reminding us who it belonged to. Our lantern flickered with every slight shift in the wind, throwing long, stretched shadows across our campsite. "You hear that?" Carter said suddenly. I froze. Nothing. No owls. No insects. No rustling. Just a silence, so crisp, it felt breakable. The mountains weren't supposed to be quiet. Ever. There was always sound, life breathing around you. But that night, the air held itself still, like the ridge was waiting. Maybe a predator nearby, I answered. But even that sounded wrong. Predators didn't silence the wind. The quiet dug deeper, sinking into our bones. I could feel my pulse thudding against my ears. Then, abruptly, the radio on the folding table beside us crackled to life. No one used it, not at night. We kept it off to save battery, but it switched on by itself. Static hissed from the speaker, soft, slow, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. One long burst, then a pause. Another burst, then another pause. I exchanged a glance with Carter. He looked as confused as I felt. "You touch it," he whispered. I shook my head. The static changed, softening, thinning, until beneath it, faint but undeniable, we started to hear something like a pattern. Not speech, exactly, but something too intentional to be random interference. A pulse, a gap, a pulse, a longer gap, like something was tapping, trying to reach us. "I've heard storms do that," Carter muttered, though his voice wavered. "There's no storm," I said, and there wasn't. The sky above was clean and moonless, a vast black bowl stretching over the ridge. No wind, no lightning, nothing, just the radio, crackling like a throat clearing itself to speak. Then the static stopped completely, cut clean, like a knife pressed to a throat. For a heartbeat, the silence was so total, I felt my breath catch. Then a single, unmistakable sound came through. A voice, not clear, not human in any familiar way. Just a low, dragging exhale, like someone trying to whisper with lungs full of cold air. It stretched out, long and thin, like it traveled a great distance. Here. It wasn't words, not fully, but it felt like something trying to shape itself into them. "We need to shut that thing off," I breathed. "Wait," Carter said quietly. "Just wait. It might be a signal bounce." "From who?" I whispered. "There's no tower for miles." Before he could answer, the voice came again, closer, still thin, still distorted, but now layered, almost like two versions of the same voice were speaking out of sync. "Can hear you." My entire body went cold. I reached for the radio, but Carter grabbed my wrist. "Don't," he said, steady but not calm. "If it's a rescue call." "It isn't," I whispered, and I wasn't sure how I knew that, but something in the tone, in the dragging timbre of it, something felt wrong. The wind picked up then, just barely, just enough to stir the edges of the tent canvas, but instead of blowing through the trees, it circled around us, almost like it was contained to the campsite. And then the radio voice changed. It wasn't distorted anymore. It was clear, and it was my voice. "Carter," the radio said, through my voice, my cadence, my tone. "Look behind you." I felt my stomach drop. Carter's eyes went wide, his face draining of color. "That's not funny," he whispered. I didn't. I started, but the radio spoke again, and this time the voice was even more unmistakably mine. "Behind you," slowly, painfully slowly. Carter turned around. There was nothing there. Just trees, just darkness, just the endless quiet. But the expression on his face didn't change. He stared into the tree line, as if trying to understand something he couldn't quite see. Then I heard it too, a sound coming from the woods. Something moving, but not walking, sliding, as if something long was dragging itself across the leaves, but lifting some parts of itself off the ground. It was soft, too soft, a whisper of movement, like fingers brushing over moss, and it was circling us, staying just out of sight, just far enough that the darkness swallowed it whole. The radio crackled again. This time the voice that came through was not mine. It wasn't human in any way. It was deeper, stretched to the point of breaking, like vocal cords dragged across something sharp. Let me in. I shut the radio off so hard, my thumb hurt. The whole campsite went silent again. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Then, in the trees to our left, something mimicked the radio. Let me in. It sounded like a person trying to copy a voice they'd only heard once, getting the shape but not the heart of it. Like hearing your name spoken by someone who doesn't understand how humans talk. We grabbed our gear and backed toward the trail. Neither of us turned our back to the woods. The sliding sound followed. Not closer, just parallel, keeping pace with us. Every few seconds it paused, then resumed, as if listening every time we stopped. We didn't run until the tree line thinned and the first sliver of moonlight cut across the ground. Only then did whatever was in the woods stop completely. It didn't follow us out, but before we reached the base of the ridge, the radio, still in my pack, still turned off, crackled one last time. Not static, not tapping, just a single, soft whisper. Found you. We reported it. Of course we did. The university blamed interference. The locals blamed old folklore, and the mountains. They didn't explain a thing. The ridge is still up there. So is whatever called out that night. And sometimes, when my house gets too quiet, I swear, I hear my own voice whispering from the dark, as if the mountain still remembers me. I should have known something was wrong the moment I stepped onto that porch, not because it looked dangerous, if anything. The old farmhouse seemed perfectly ordinary. Weathered boards, a sagging roofline, windows dusty from years of untouched mountain wind, the kind of place that looked abandoned but not ruined, a place frozen between life and neglect. But the silence around it, that was wrong from the start. I didn't hear birds, didn't hear insects, didn't even hear wind moving through the trees. Everything around the house felt held in suspension, as if the entire forest were drawing one long, collective breath and refusing to let it go. I should have turned back, but I had a reason for being there. A stupid, naive reason. I'd come to find out what happened to my uncle. Not the uncle I saw on holidays, or talked to about sports. No, this was my mother's brother, the one who kept to himself, the one who disappeared 20 years ago in the Appalachian foothills without so much as a goodbye letter. Locals said he was called into the mountain. My mother said he ran from responsibility. I didn't believe either story. So when I found a map tucked inside one of his old notebooks, a map with a single location circled, deep in the woods near Sandlick Hollow, I went looking. And that's how I ended up standing alone in front of that farmhouse, the one that shouldn't have been there. There was no road leading to it, no trail, no path. And yet the house sat perfectly rooted on a cleared patch of earth, like the land had been carved out specifically for it. The air smelled strange. Not rotten, not damp, but metallic, brassy. Almost like standing inside a bell. I pushed open the porch door. The hinges didn't squeal. They didn't move silently, either. Instead, they hummed. A low vibration traveled up through my hand, as if the wood itself was alive beneath my fingers. I stepped inside, and instantly felt the temperature drop. Not cold like winter, cold like depth. Cold like standing in an underground cavern where light and warmth couldn't reach. The house was empty, at least it looked that way. Dust coated every surface, floorboards sagged with age, but nothing looked touched. Not by animals, not by people, not even by time. I walked through the kitchen first. Plates still sat stacked on the counter. A kettle rested on an old iron stove. Boots sat neatly beside the back door. It felt less like an abandoned home, and more like someone had stepped out for a moment and never returned. "Uncle," I tried saying it, half a whisper, half a plea, but the word felt too loud in that dense air. The sound didn't echo, it didn't fade, it simply stopped, as if the walls absorbed it. That was the moment I realized the house wasn't silent. It was humming, soft, deep, a vibration more felt than heard. It came from the floorboards, from the walls, from the beams above me, like the entire structure was breathing on its own quiet frequency. I stepped into the living room. That's when I saw the chair. It sat facing the wall, perfectly centered. Not askew, not toppled, just placed. The cushion dented as if someone had been sitting there recently. A notebook rested open on the floor beside it. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my uncle's. My chest tightened. I knelt down and picked it up. The pages were filled with frantic scribbles, jagged lines looping and turning over themselves in frantic strokes, as if his hand couldn't move fast enough to keep up with something he was trying to describe. Only one sentence repeated clearly, "It's underneath us." My mouth went dry. Beneath the writing, the lines distorted, almost like they weren't drawn, but pulled across the page by something unseen. The humming grew stronger. I felt it through my knees, through the soles of my feet, rising in waves. That was when the floor creaked behind me, slowly, deliberately, as if someone had stepped into the room. I turned around, expecting, hoping to see a person. Even a stranger would have been better than what my imagination was conjuring. The sense of something tall, something thin, something patient, standing only a few feet away. But there was nothing. Just the doorway, just dust, just stillness. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that something had moved. Something just out of sight. I forced myself to stand. "Uncle," I tried again, quieter this time. Still nothing. The humming deepened, vibrating up my spine like a hand pressing against each vertebra. I backed away from the living room and moved toward the hall, following a faint draft that brushed against my ankles. The second I stepped into the hallway, the air shifted, heavier, thicker, as if something invisible stood directly in front of me. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but something else, a weight I can't describe, pushed me forward, like the house wanted me to continue. That's when I saw the cellar door. It was cracked open, not wide, just enough for a sliver of darkness to pool out into the hallway like ink bleeding across the floor. The humming was louder here, almost rhythmic, almost like breathing. A slow inhale, a long exhale, inhale, exhale. I didn't want to go down there, but I had to. My uncle's note, repeated in my mind. "It's underneath us." I gripped the cellar door and pulled. It swung open without resistance. The stairs below sank into pitch blackness, so thick it felt physical. My phone light cut through only a few feet before drowning. I took a step down, the humming intensified. So low, it rattled the inside of my teeth. Another step, the air grew warmer, damp, earthy, like standing inside the open mouth of something old and breathing. Halfway down, the humming suddenly stopped. Silence exploded around me, heavy, absolute. Then a sound rose from the darkness below. Not movement, not a voice, a tone, a single, vibrating note, almost like a human voice humming, but deeper, layered beneath the floor. It slid upward, rising in pitch, until my knees buckled. I grabbed the rail to keep from falling. The tone grew brighter, clearer, until I realized it wasn't one tone. It was many a chorus, a layered hum of dozens, hundreds, of voices vibrating together. Some high, some low, some so faint they barely existed. They were merging, aligning, creating something like a single, impossible sound rising from beneath the house. My hands trembled. What was beneath me? What had my uncle found? I reached the bottom step and shined my phone light forward. The beam revealed the packed dirt floor of the cellar. Old shelves, rusted tools, mason jars, clouded by dust. And then, the floor rippled, just slightly, just enough to break the surface, like something shifting beneath the earth. I stepped back, breath catching, another ripple, then another. The humming voices rose, harmonizing, converging, until the cellar vibrated so violently my phone shook in my hand. Then, with sudden clarity, the harmony stopped. Every voice cut to silence, except one, a single, isolated hum. A human hum, and it was coming from directly beneath my feet. I stumbled backward. The dirt shifted, slowly, purposefully, like something was pushing upward from below. I bolted up the stairs, nearly tripped, didn't care. As I reached the top, the cellar door slammed shut behind me with a force that shook the whole house. The humming cut off, silence swallowed everything. I didn't wait. I ran out of the farmhouse, through the clearing, into the forest. Didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs numbed. When I finally reached the ranger station several miles away, I tried explaining what happened. They followed me back the next morning, but the house wasn't there. Not the porch, not the foundation, not the clearing. The forest was intact, untouched ground, thick with roots and leaves, as if no structure had ever existed. I know what I saw, I know where I stood, and I know what hummed beneath that floor. My uncle didn't disappear. He was taken, or absorbed. Whatever lives under the Appalachians, whatever that house was built over, it's still down there, humming, calling, waiting for someone else to hear it. And sometimes, late at night, when the world goes quiet, I swear I still feel that vibration beneath my feet, like something deep underground is remembering me. I've walked plenty of mountain roads in my life, but I've never seen one appear out of nowhere. That's the part I still can't explain. Not the sounds, not the lights, not what followed me through the trees that night. It's the road itself, how it shouldn't have existed, and yet somehow forced itself into the world like something pushing through thin fabric. I was driving home from a late shift at the lodge, coasting down one of those Appalachian back roads, where the asphalt cracks like old bones and the fog rolls in thick as wool. My headlights barely cut through the mist. I knew the route well enough, but visibility was so bad it felt like the world ended 3 feet in front of my bumper. Then I saw a flicker of light on my right. At first I thought it was a porch lamp, or maybe a firefly blown close to the windshield, but the light held steady, warm, round, amber, not like an LED, not like a car. It had the soft, trembling glow of something older. A lantern, swung gently, deliberately, as if someone was walking with it. I slowed down, leaning forward, squinting through the fog, and that's when I saw the road. A narrow dirt path split off from the main highway. I'd driven this stretch for years. There was never a turn here. No old mining trails, no hunting roads, nothing. But tonight, there it was, and standing at the mouth of the path, holding the lantern, was a figure, a tall shape, thin, motionless, except for the slow sway of the lantern in its hand. I pulled to the shoulder without even making the decision to stop. My foot just pressed the brake on instinct. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a hiker in trouble, or a ranger, or someone needing help. But as my headlights washed over the figure, the lantern didn't cast a shadow. The road beneath it remained in that same fog-soaked gray. The trees behind it stayed untouched. Only the lantern glowed, floating, almost detached. I cracked my window. "Hey, you okay?" The figure didn't move, didn't nod, didn't raise a hand, just stood there, the lantern swaying with unnatural rhythm. Something in me tightened, a small, cold, instinctive, not right below my ribs. I should have driven away. Every part of me knew it, but then I felt it, this strange pressure in the air, like the atmosphere shifted to focus entirely on me, like the trees, the fog, the night itself waited for what I would do next. My hand, shaking a little, reached for my phone. No signal, not even one bar. The lantern flickered, once, twice, and the figure slowly turned its body toward the dirt path. Then it began to walk, not toward me, away, down the newly formed road, slow, repetitive, like its steps were rehearsed, looping the same pattern over and over. I rolled the window higher, but didn't shut it fully. Something about closing the glass felt like sealing myself inside a coffin. Another few seconds passed, then the lantern dimmed, as if the figure were moving deeper into the fog. That should have been the end of it. I should have driven off, But then, I heard it. A voice. Not loud, not clear. A whisper. My name. Not shouted. Not called with urgency. Just whispered. As if spoken inches from my ear. Except it didn't come from inside the car. It came from the trees beside the lantern road. I turned sharply, heart pounding. The woods were too dark to see anything, but I felt movement in the brush. Gentle, coordinated, circling. Then the whisper came again, a little louder. My name. I don't know why I opened my car door. I can't justify it even now. But something deep inside me reacted to hearing my own name said with such quiet familiarity. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't malicious. It sounded almost pleading, like someone I knew needed help. I stepped onto the shoulder. The fog swallowed my legs immediately, thick and cold around my shins like it was trying to keep me from moving forward. Who's there? I called. No answer. Only the sound of the lantern figure continuing farther down the path. Feet dragging lightly along the dirt, lantern swinging in that hypnotic arc. I took one step toward the path. The ground felt wrong. Not soft, not muddy. Wrong, like stepping onto a heartbeat beneath the soil. I stepped back quickly, breath catching. The lantern dimmed further in the fog. That's when I saw movement. Not from the lantern figure, from the woods. Shapes, several, shifted behind the trees, shadows without body, silhouettes without detail, like the fog itself was learning the outline of human forms. They pulsed in and out of view, almost drifting between the trunks. I couldn't tell how many there were. 4, 10, 100. All of them swaying, all of them keeping distance, all of them watching. My fingers started to numb. I forced myself to turn around, to get back in my car, to leave, but the whisper came again, a third time, except now, it wasn't my name. It was a sentence, a clear one. Don't leave us. My stomach dropped. The voice was unmistakable this time. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It wasn't a wind trick. It wasn't a hallucination. It was my uncle's voice. The uncle who vanished 34 years ago in these mountains without a trace. The uncle no one ever found, his voice echoing through the tree line like a memory pulled into reality. Don't leave us. I spun back toward the trees, throat tight, tears stinging unexpectedly behind my eyes. Uncle. My voice cracked. The shadows shifted. The lantern flickered. The fog thickened. Then I heard it again. Multiple voices now. Layered, desperate, overlapping. Don't leave us, please. Stay. Each voice sounded familiar in a faint, impossible way. Not just my uncle's, but voices I recognized from years ago. A neighbor who went missing hiking. A school classmate who disappeared during a fishing trip. A ranger whose body was never recovered. Their voices blending together like a broken chorus. That broke something inside me. Fear, yes. But also grief, and guilt for even thinking about leaving. I stepped toward the trees again. But the second my foot touched the beginning of the lantern road, something grabbed my ankle. Not a hand, not a claw, the ground. The soil around my shoe tightened, clamping down like the earth itself was curling upward to grip me. I yanked back quickly, stumbling. The dirt relaxed, flattening instantly, as if it hadn't moved at all. The shapes in the trees pulsed. The lantern stopped swaying. The figure holding it froze mid-step. Then a low sound rose from the forest floor. A hum, a deep, resonant vibration that traveled up my legs, into my ribs, behind my teeth. It was the same hum people described before sinkholes form, before earthquakes hit, except this hum wasn't natural. It felt intentional. It felt aware. It felt like a warning. The fog surged toward me, swirling around my knees, pulling gently, not violently, but insistently, toward the road. I almost let it. I swear on everything I have, I almost stepped forward. I wanted to believe the voices. I wanted to believe I could actually bring someone home. I wanted to believe the mountains weren't swallowing people permanently. But then, the lantern went out. Not dimmed, not flickered, extinguished. Instantly, like someone pinched the flame, the figure vanished with it, swallowed into the fog without a sound. Every shadow in the trees froze, the voices cut off mid-whisper. Silence collapsed over the road like a trap snapping shut, and in that suffocating stillness, a single thought cut through my mind, a feeling, not a voice. If you take one more step, you won't come back either. I ran, didn't look over my shoulder, didn't slow down. Just sprinted back into my car, slammed the door, and hit the gas so hard the tires screeched on wet asphalt. The fog behind me churned like something enormous exhaled deep inside it. When I reached town, I pulled over and sobbed into my steering wheel, out of fear, out of relief, and out of the terrible, aching certainty that the voices I heard were real. The road was gone the next morning. No dirt path, no tracks, no lantern, just solid woods as if nothing had happened. But sometimes, on rainy nights, when the fog drifts low and the wind dies completely, I swear I still hear my uncle's voice in the distance, soft, weak, calling from a place I can't reach, and waiting, hoping someone will answer someday. I didn't sleep the night after the lantern rode, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that fog curling around my legs again. Every time I started to drift, I heard the whisper, my uncle's voice, fading in and out, like someone speaking underwater. By dawn, my nerves felt stripped raw, like everything inside me had been sanded down to the bone. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, my mind replaying the incident out of fear. But deep down, I knew better. Something followed me home that night. It wasn't a person, wasn't an animal, wasn't a ghost in the way people normally mean it. It was something older, quieter, patient, something from those woods that learned how to imitate voices, not to comfort, but to lure. Something that lived in the untouched folds of the mountains where the sunlight never quite reached. And it didn't like letting anyone leave. I first heard it the morning after. I'd left my bedroom window cracked, trying to pull in fresh air after hours of feeling like I couldn't breathe. The fog outside was still thick, even with daylight bleeding through it. It made the world look washed out and pale, like everything was underwater. While I stood there, staring at the tree line behind my house, something moved. Not much, just a subtle shift in the brush. A swaying of branches without wind, then a soft, dragging sound, like something pulling itself forward, one slow inch at a time. I should have shut the window, locked it, walked away. Instead, I leaned closer. At first I thought it was an animal, a deer, maybe, or a stray dog. But the longer I watched, the more I realized whatever moved in those trees wasn't shaped right. It wasn't upright. It wasn't on four legs. It was low, too low, the height of a crawling infant, but moving with the weight of something massive. I pressed my palm against the glass. The dragging paused. The woods went still. Then, from deep inside the tree line, something let out a low exhale, soft, almost curious, like it sensed me watching. I stumbled back so fast I hit my dresser. The sound stopped immediately, not faded, stopped, cut off like someone clamping a hand over a mouth. And then the woods returned to silence. I closed the window and pulled the blinds shut. That should have been enough. It wasn't, not even close. I tried to go about my day, but everything felt off. My house felt too quiet, my footsteps too loud. Every sound seemed amplified, like the walls were listening. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded like something breathing in short, clipped intervals. Around noon, I decided I needed to get away for a while, clear my head, distract myself, anything. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. The air changed instantly. You know how the world feels right before a thunderstorm, when all the pressure shifts and your ears tighten a little. That's what hit me, but heavier, more oppressive. It pressed against my chest, against my ribs, as if the atmosphere itself resented me for stepping into it. And then I heard it. Not the dragging this time. Footsteps. Slow, rough footsteps. Measured, deliberate. Too heavy to be human. One step. A pause. Another step. Not approaching directly. Tracing the edge of my backyard. Following the line of trees like it was drawing a perimeter around my home. I turned slowly. Nothing moved, but the footsteps continued, circling. I couldn't see anything in the fog, but I could feel it. A presence, a weight, a watching. Every hair on my arms rose one at a time. I whispered to myself, "Don't run." Running felt like the wrong choice. The mountains respond to instinct. If you act like prey, you become prey, at least. That's what every old-timer in Appalachia says. They don't tell you what hunts, just that something does. So I stood still, perfectly still. The footsteps paused behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't breathe. And for a moment, the fog grew so thick I couldn't see my own hands. Then, something brushed my back. Not wind, not a branch. Something with shape. Soft, but intentional. My spine locked up, my throat closed, my vision tunneled. I didn't move. God help me. I didn't move. Then the fog shifted again, drawing back as if the thing behind me inhaled. The pressure disappeared. The air lightened. The presence faded. I didn't hear it leave, but it was gone. I waited a full minute before I turned. Nothing. No tracks. No broken branches. Only the fog coiling lazily through the grass like smoke from an invisible fire. I got in my car and drove without thinking. I don't remember locking the door. I barely remember pulling out of the driveway. All I remember is the sound as I turned onto the main road. From the woods behind my house, I heard the dragging again. Except now, it was faster, following, matching my speed, keeping pace with my car, like it wasn't crawling. Like it was gliding. I pressed the gas harder. The dragging grew louder. I hit 50. The dragging turned into a rough, uneven gallop. Then something slammed into the back quarter panel of my car. I swerved so hard, I nearly lost control. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. The woods along the road twisted past me in a blur. Fog streaked sideways across my windshield. The air felt charged. Electric, like something massive ran just behind the tree line. At 60 miles an hour, it kept pace. I heard it breathing, deep. Wet inhalations that rattled like lungs scraping against stone, every time I gained even a little distance. The breathing grew louder, like it was closing the gap. Then, suddenly, silence. Complete and total silence. I slowed the car, chest tight. My hands were shaking so violently, I could barely keep my grip on the wheel. I forced myself to check the mirrors. Nothing behind me. No movement in the fog. Not even the outline of something disappearing back into the woods. Just emptiness. The way absence feels after someone steps out of a room. I kept driving. I didn't go far, just to the closest gas station. The old one with 2 pumps, and a buzzing fluorescent sign that flickers even in daylight. A place that always smelled like diesel and stale coffee. But today, it felt almost safe. I parked and sat there for a minute, forehead against the steering wheel, breathing hard, trying to get air into my chest. A knock on my window made me jump so hard I nearly screamed. It was the clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes who'd worked there since I was a kid. She leaned down toward the window, peering at me through the glass. "You all right?" she asked. "You look like you've seen something." I cracked the window, my voice shaking. "You didn't hear anything? See anything in the woods on your way here?" She frowned. "No, but..." She hesitated, glancing past me toward the road I'd come from. "There's been talk." My blood ran cold. "Talk about what?" She lowered her voice, even though no one else was around. "People hear things in the fog lately. Scratching, crawling, calling their names. Couple folks swear they seen a figure with a light wandering the old ridge trail. Sheriff's department says it's teenagers with flashlights. But," she swallowed, "teenagers don't crawl." I felt my pulse in my throat. She leaned slightly closer. "Whatever you think you saw, don't go looking for it. That's how something gets a hold of you out here. I wanted to ask, gets a hold of you how? But something in her expression told me she wouldn't answer. Or maybe she didn't know. I filled my tank, bought a coffee I never drank, and sat in my parked car, staring at the fog rolling across the far tree line. I should have driven home, but I didn't, because as the clerk walked back inside, I heard it again, from the woods across the road. A voice, my uncle's voice, calling my name, and this time, there was another voice with it, my own voice, calling back, from somewhere deeper in the fog, as if something in those mountains wasn't just following me anymore. It was learning me, studying me, becoming me, and it wanted me to hear what it sounded like. Wearing my voice like a mask, I closed my eyes, trembling, and the last thing I heard before I forced myself to drive away was the soft, rhythmic drag of something moving across the forest floor, closer, patient, waiting for night. I didn't want to go home that night. Every instinct in me said don't. The same instinct that makes animals hesitate at the edge of a cliff, or freeze when a shadow moves wrong. Some part of me knew that whatever followed me through the fog wasn't done, and going back to the place it had touched me, brushed me, felt like walking willingly into its reach. But where else was I supposed to go? I drove around for hours after leaving the gas station. I didn't even realize where I was heading. My hands moved on the wheel like they belonged to someone else. My mind kept replaying the clerk's warning, don't go looking for it. That's how something gets a hold of you out here. But what if it already had? Around dusk, when the sky dimmed to that bruised purple color Appalachia does so well, I finally turned into my driveway. Fog clung to the tree line again, thicker now, pooling on the ground like low-lying smoke from a fire no one remembered starting. My house sat there in the haze, a dark shape against the fading light, silent, still, watching. It shouldn't have felt like something alive, but it did. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me. I sat in the car for a long time before forcing myself out. The air tasted wrong, metallic, damp. It had that heavy feeling again. The atmospheric pressure pressing down on my lungs like a weight. My ears clicked when I swallowed. Even my footsteps on the gravel sounded muted, as though the fog swallowed the sound before it could travel. I paused halfway to my front door. Something clicked. Not a twig, not a stone, a deliberate sound, like someone's tongue tapping the roof of their mouth. Once, twice, slow and intentional, coming from the woods behind me. I didn't turn, not yet. I waited. 3 seconds, 4, then another click, closer. The kind of closeness that makes the back of your neck go cold. I grabbed my keys and rushed inside, locking the door behind me with shaking hands. For a moment, the house felt like a sanctuary, like maybe the walls could keep whatever lurked in the fog out. But then the quiet settled in, a thick, unnatural quiet. The kind where the air hums just a little, like power lines in a storm. The kind where you feel watched, even when there's no one in the room. I set my keys down and listened. Nothing, no wind, no insects, no distant cars. Just the low vibration of stillness. I turned on the living room light. It flickered, just for half a second, and then steadied. But that single moment was enough to make my stomach twist. Something about the flicker reminded me of the lantern I'd seen swaying among the trees, flickering not from wind, but from movement. I stepped deeper into the house. Every floorboard creaked like it hadn't been walked in years. My own shadow seemed slower than it should have been, like it lagged half a breath behind my movements. I told myself I was imagining it, that paranoia does strange things to perception, but that didn't explain the sound that came next. A soft, rhythmic tapping from the back wall of the house. At first I thought it might be a branch swaying in the wind, but there was no wind, and the taps were too evenly spaced. Too steady. Tap, 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 like someone knocking gently, patiently. I froze in the hallway. The tapping stopped. I waited. Then, something scraped down the siding of the house, slowly, like a fingernail or a stone being dragged along the wood. I stepped backward without realizing it. The scraping moved upward, then sideways, following the line of my footsteps along the inside of the hallway. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I should have run, should have grabbed my keys and left, but I just stood there, breath caught in my throat. The scraping stopped right at the corner of the wall closest to me. Then came a new sound, a whisper, not words, not at first. Just breath, slow, wet, drawn out, inhalations, like someone learning how lungs worked. Then it tried again, haha, not words, not human, but close enough to mimic something resembling speech. My knees nearly buckled. Whatever was outside wasn't mindless. It was trying, learning, practicing, like a child repeating sounds, shaping them until they resembled language. I backed away until my shoulder hit the opposite wall. The breathy whispers grew louder, like the thing pressed its face against the siding, trying to get the shape of the sounds right. Then, it said something that froze every part of me, a perfect copy of my uncle's voice. "Let me in." I stumbled backward and nearly tripped. The voice repeated, clearer this time, as if the thing was pleased with itself. "Let me in." It sounded like my uncle, but the timing was wrong, the rhythm off. The syllables stretched like the thing didn't understand the meaning, only the shape. Then, the voice changed, shifted, aligned itself with my cadence, my pitch, my breaths. My own voice echoed through the walls. "It's cold out here." I felt something collapse inside me. That voice, my voice, spoken from the wrong side of the wall, was somehow worse than anything else. It broke something familiar, twisted it until it belonged to the mountains instead of me. I pressed both hands over my ears. "Stop," I whispered. "Please stop." But the voice only grew more confident, more precise, in my exact voice. "Let me in." I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a knife. Not because I thought it would help. I didn't, but I needed something, anything, to keep my hands from shaking. The whispering paused, then 3 slow knocks on the window, the kind of knocks you use when you know the person inside can hear you breathing. I whipped around. The blinds on the kitchen window trembled slightly, as though something dragged a hand across them from outside. Then a shape appeared behind the blinds. Not a silhouette, not a face, just height. Something tall, too tall, so tall its head would have been brushing the top of the frame. I backed away until my heel hit a cabinet. The shape leaned forward, closer, closer. The blinds bowed inward from the pressure of something pressing against them. I held my breath. Then, nothing. The pressure vanished. The shape was gone. The blinds stilled. Silence returned, a deep, suffocating silence. I didn't dare move for almost a minute. Then a new sound drifted in through the walls. Not tapping, not scraping, humming. A low, tuneless hum, mimicking the way I used to hum when I cooked dinner. The exact rhythm, the exact pattern, a perfect copy. My throat tightened. This thing wasn't just following me. It was studying me, repeating me, trying to wear me like a voice, like a memory, like a skin. Night settled fully around the house, and with the darkness came something else. A soft dragging in the yard, slow, steady, getting closer, circling the house once, twice, a third time. Each pass slower than the last, like it knew I was inside, and it enjoyed taking its time. Then it stopped beneath my bedroom window. I heard it breathing, long, heavy breaths that fogged the glass from the outside. I stood in the hallway, paralyzed, listening to its lungs scrape in and out like they were filled with gravel. Then, slowly, it exhaled my name, perfectly, softly, through the glass. I didn't sleep that night. I barely dared to breathe, because for the first time, I didn't feel like I was trapped in my house with something outside. I felt like the thing outside was waiting for the moment it could slip in. Not by force, but by invitation. or by familiarity, as if one day soon I'd hear a version of my own voice from the woods, and I wouldn't be sure which voice belonged to the real me. I didn't think I'd sleep again after that night. Between the tapping, the scraping, the mimicked voice, the humming, whatever wandered through the fog had already dug deep into my nerves. And yet, sometime after dawn, after the sounds outside finally went still, exhaustion pinned me down like a weight. I didn't mean to drift off. I didn't want to. But fear is a strange thing. It drains you until sleep becomes a kind of surrender. I woke up the next afternoon with the kind of jolt that feels like falling. My chest burned from breathing too hard. My vision blurred. Sweat clung cold to the back of my neck. At first I didn't understand why. Then I remembered the dream. If it was a dream, even now, thinking about it makes my skin crawl in a way actual nightmares never have. Because the dream didn't feel like a product of my mind. It felt like something outside had reached in, opened a door, and stepped into me. I was in my house, but it wasn't really my house. Everything looked slightly wrong. The walls warped, the lights dimmed, shadows stretched too far. The air vibrated with that same heavy, unnatural pressure I'd felt in the forest. In the dream, I walked down the hallway, except my legs didn't move the way I wanted. It felt like I was being guided, nudged forward by invisible hands. The floorboards creaked louder with every step, but in a slow, dragging rhythm, like something walked with me, using my weight as a guide. And then I heard it, that voice, the one that shouldn't exist, my voice, but wrong. It came from the living room, a slow, breathless whisper, repeating my name like it was trying to burn the shape of it into its memory. I felt myself turning the corner, even though I didn't want to. And I saw it, standing in the middle of the room, tall, motionless, facing the wall like it was studying the grain of the wood. I couldn't see features. Everything about it was blurred, like looking at a figure behind old frosted glass. But something about its shape made bile rise in my throat. Its proportions were off, subtle, but unmistakable. Something stretched too long, something bent the wrong way. Something not meant to stand upright. The thing turned its head a fraction, not enough for me to see a face, but enough to acknowledge me, and in my voice, it whispered, "I know you now." I jolted awake, heart pounding, hands shaking, convinced the thing was standing at the foot of my bed, but the room was empty. For a second, I thought maybe the dream was just my imagination finally cracking under the pressure. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the wall opposite my bed was a smear, not a stain, not dirt, a line, a long vertical streak like something damp had leaned its head against the wall and slowly dragged downward, right where the thing's blurred head had been in my dream. My knees weakened. I don't know how long I stared at that mark, but it felt like hours. The air felt heavy again. The same humming silence wrapped around the house. That smear wasn't there yesterday. I would have noticed it. Whatever visited my dream left something behind, or worse, came from inside the room. I stood, legs trembling, and stepped closer to the smear. My hand hovered just above it, not touching, but close enough to feel the cold radiating from it. Not normal cold. This was deeper, the kind that sinks into your bones. I backed away. I needed to get out of the room, out of the house, out of this entire nightmare Appalachia seemed determined to pull me into. But when I opened my bedroom door, I froze again. Something had changed. The hallway was darker than it should have been, not like the light bulb burned out, but like the shadows themselves grew thicker, swallowing the corners of the walls. The air carried a faint, rhythmic vibration. For a moment, I thought it was my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Then I realized it was coming from below me, from the floorboards. A pulse, a slow, steady thump, 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 like something beneath the house was breathing, or worse, waiting. I stepped back into my room and shut the door. I didn't want to go near the hallway. not with that pulse throbbing like a second heartbeat in the house. I paced the room, trying to calm my breathing, but the windows kept catching my eye. I pulled the curtains back an inch. Fog hugged the backyard again, dense, low, and unmoving. It felt like looking out into a dream, a place suspended in time, waiting for something to break the stillness. Then I saw it, a shape at the edge of the tree line, tall, stretched thin, facing directly toward the house. It didn't move, not even a twitch, but something about its stillness felt deliberate, as if the act of standing so perfectly motionless was meant to attract my attention. My throat closed. Slowly, the shape lifted an arm. The movement was smooth, too smooth, like joints didn't quite exist the way they should. And then the arm bent at an angle I didn't think was possible. It raised a hand and pointed, not at the house, at my window. I stumbled backward, hitting my desk hard enough that something fell to the floor. The noise didn't matter. Nothing mattered, because the shape didn't react. It just kept pointing, like it wanted me to know. It sees you. I let the curtain fall closed, and for a moment, the house was silent again. Then came the knock, one single, gentle tap on my bedroom door. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The knock came again, soft, patient. I forced myself to whisper, "Who's there?" No answer, just a third knock. Then, in that same mimicry of my voice, perfect, down to the breath between words, "Let me in." My back hit the wall. My fingers dug into the plaster. The thing was inside the house. I didn't know how. I didn't hear a door, didn't hear a window break, but it was at my bedroom door, asking, no, inviting itself in with the voice it stole from me. The doorknob twisted, not fast, not frantic, slow, measured, like it wanted me to hear every click of metal. I grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, and pressed it against the doorknob. My arms shook, my lungs burned. The doorknob jittered once more, then stopped. Silence. Silence so absolute I could hear my pulse in my teeth. I stayed pressed against the door for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, I dared to whisper, "Are you still there?" And in a voice that didn't try to mimic me at all, a low, breathy rasp that scraped against the wood, it whispered back, "Yes." I don't remember sinking to the floor. Don't remember crying. Don't remember the sun eventually rising again. But I remember the feeling that settled over me as morning light crept into the room. It wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to wear me down. Break me mentally. Break me emotionally. Break whatever boundary kept it from stepping inside without an invitation. And the worst part, something in me whispered the one truth I didn't want to admit. This thing wasn't hunting me randomly. It chose me, and now it knew my voice, my footsteps, my breathing, my dreams. It knew me well enough to become me, if I let it. If even for 1 second I hesitated, it would step through the door, and I wasn't sure anyone would ever know the real me had been replaced. I didn't notice it at first. If I had, maybe none of what followed would have happened. Maybe I could have shaken it off, whatever it was, before it fully realized I had seen it, before it understood I could hear it, before it knew I had started to fear it. But fear makes you noticeable. Fear makes you loud, even when you think you're being quiet. My mistake was that I let my fear grow. It all began the night I left Frostline Ridge, that lonely stretch of Appalachian forest where mist curled around the trees, like it was trying to whisper something old and unkind. I had been on the ridge, researching unexplained disappearances, just another stop on the long list of dark corners scattered across the mountains. The sun had disappeared behind a thick wall of clouds around dusk, and the woods had fallen into that strange hush that makes your instincts sharpen. I should have headed back earlier. Everyone always says that. But the silence felt like a puzzle, and I stayed too long trying to understand what was missing from it. No insects, no wind, not even the distant rumble of water. It was as if the forest held its breath and waited to see what I would do. I remember the exact moment things turned. I was hiking back toward the trailhead with my flashlight in hand, scanning the path. The ground was soft with old leaves, and my boots barely made a sound. Then I heard it, a second pair of steps. Not close, not far, just following. I stopped. It stopped. I walked. It walked. But that wasn't the part that scared me most. It was the way the forest reacted. How the silence deepened. How the trees, tall, skeletal, watching, seemed to lean inward just slightly, like listeners drawn toward a story they already knew the ending to. I never saw anything that night. No shape behind me, no movement, no reason to feel hunted, but the sense of being watched dug into me like a splinter that traveled deeper each time I ignored it. And the moment I reached my car, the forest seemed to exhale, relieved, somehow. Relieved that I was leaving, or relieved that something else had found me. I told myself it was nothing. I left Frostline Ridge behind. I drove home. But whatever had walked in the trees behind me, it didn't stay there. At first, the signs were small. The sound of footsteps on my front porch 2 nights after my trip. Light, slow, measured, like someone testing the wooden boards, shifting their weight. Learning how the structure responded, I sat up in bed and held my breath, listening with the kind of focus only fear can give you. Then, silence, a long one. I'd nearly convinced myself I imagined it when I heard the softest creak. Not the sound of someone stepping, but the sound of someone leaning. Right against my door, I crept toward the peephole, every instinct begging me to stop. But curiosity has always had sharper claws than caution. I looked and saw nothing, just the dim glow of my porch light, just the empty darkness of my yard. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been standing there only seconds earlier, something that knew to move the moment I tried to see it. Over the next few days, the disturbances grew stranger. Objects in my home weren't missing, just subtly shifted. A chair angled slightly toward the window, a book pulled 1 inch from the shelf. My coat moved from the hook to the back of the couch. Small changes, almost dismissible, but every time I corrected them, I felt watched, as if something was learning me, learning my habits, learning how long it took me to notice things. And every night the footsteps returned, always stopping at the door, never trying to come in. Yet, the moment I knew it wasn't human happened 3 nights after the footsteps began. I woke up at 3:11 a.m., a time I came to recognize far too well, because someone was standing outside my bedroom window. I didn't hear them walk up, didn't hear the grass move, didn't hear breathing or shifting or any normal sign of life. Just presence, heavy, focused, expectant. The curtains were drawn, but the silhouette against them was unmistakable. A tall figure, motionless, its outline warped slightly at the edges like heat distortion. It didn't knock, didn't speak, didn't try to force the window open. It just stood there, listening. I reached for my phone, heart pounding, but just as my fingers touched it, the shadow vanished. Not walked away, not faded into distance. It blinked out, 1 moment there, 1 moment gone. And when I looked outside, the night was still again, absolutely still, like it had been reset. That's when I realized it hadn't followed me home. It had attached itself, like something hungry, or curious, or both. I tried ignoring it, pretending life was normal. But the thing that tracks you doesn't lose interest just because you want it to. The signs escalated, whispers in the hallway just beyond the reach of light. The feeling of someone standing behind me when I brushed my teeth. My name spoken from inside my own closet. Not loud, not aggressive, but almost. Testing the shape of the word, it never touched me. Not physically, but emotionally. It wore me down thread by thread. The real breaking point came one night when I believed, stupidly, that I had gained the upper hand. I'd researched Appalachian folklore, combed through stories about watchers, mimics, and shadow followers that cling to travelers who stay too long in silent places. Most of them shared one instruction: don't acknowledge it. Don't speak to it. Don't let it know you've noticed. But fear makes you reckless. That night, around 2:40 a.m., I heard the soft rustle of movement in the hallway outside my bedroom door. Not footsteps, more like someone brushing a hand against the wall, fingertips grazing the surface, exploring, learning. I sat up slowly. The sound stopped. My room felt too small, too thin, like the air had thickened into something viscous. My pulse got loud, so loud I thought it would give me away. Then came the breathing, not right outside the door, but directly behind it, slow, steady, listening. I don't know what possessed me to do it. Fear, defiance, exhaustion, but I whispered into the dark, "I know you're there." The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was aware. My words had drawn a line, and whatever was outside the door understood that I had crossed it. For the first time since Frostline Ridge, I felt something like emotion coming from it. Not anger exactly, more like interest, as if I had finally become worthy of its attention. The next sound was a single, deliberate tap on the door, just one, but it echoed through the room like knuckles brushing the edge of a coffin. After that night, it didn't bother staying hidden. I saw it in reflections, a tall, bent figure standing behind me when I turned on the bathroom light, disappearing when I spun around. I heard it humming tunelessly in the kitchen around midnight, though no lights were on and no floorboards creaked. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes to sleep, I felt the mattress dip, as if someone rested their weight at the very edge, watching me through the dark. It never harmed me, never tried to, but there was a growing intention in its presence. It wanted something, and I didn't know what. I finally broke the way all people do, quietly. I left my house in the middle of the night and drove. No direction, no destination, just away from the thing that had taken interest in me, away from its listening, away from its learning. But halfway down the mountain road, headlights flickering through the fog, I realized something with a cold clarity that made my blood turn to ice. The subtle pressure I felt at the back of my neck, the sense of someone leaning close, the breath that wasn't mine. It was in the car with me. I didn't look into the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I could feel it sitting behind me, silent and patient, as if this was the moment it had been waiting for all along. The road ahead blurred. My hands shook. Every instinct screamed not to acknowledge it, so I didn't. But I understood something terrible then. It had never followed me home. It had chosen me, and once something in the Appalachians chooses you, you don't escape it. You endure it. You coexist with it. You try not to notice when it stands behind you in quiet rooms. And sometimes, when the night grows too still, and the house too silent, and the air too heavy, you hear it breathe again, right next to your ear, ending nothing, starting something that has no name, no face, no mercy, only patience. I don't know how long I sat in that car after realizing it was behind me. Minutes, maybe hours. Time loses its meaning when you're afraid to turn around. Eventually, though, exhaustion replaced panic, and I found myself back home without remembering how I got there. I only know that when I stepped inside, the house felt wrong, not unfamiliar, not hostile, but occupied, like air freshly disturbed, or breath still lingering in a room someone just stepped out of. I didn't see it that night, didn't hear it, didn't feel it leaning over my shoulder or shifting in the corners of my vision, and that should have comforted me, should have calmed me. But there was something even worse than being followed. The silence it left behind. Not peaceful silence. This was stretched tight, strained, as if the entire structure of the house was waiting for me to make a mistake. For a night and a day, nothing moved, nothing whispered, nothing breathed behind doors. And that was when I realized something I hadn't dared consider. It wasn't gone. It was somewhere I couldn't see yet, waiting, watching, learning. The first sign came nearly 24 hours after the last incident. I was in the kitchen reheating leftovers, trying to pretend life hadn't unraveled into waking nightmares, when I heard it, so soft I wasn't sure if it was real. A tap, not upstairs, not outside, not at the windows or walls. Beneath me, under the floorboards. I froze mid-motion, fork in hand, breath trapped in my throat. Another tap followed, then another, slow, measured, almost polite, as if knocking from inside the foundation. I knelt down, pressing my ear to the hardwood floor. My fingers trembled, and I held them tightly against my palm to quiet the shaking. For a few seconds, I heard nothing. Then, a whisper, a long, low whisper that didn't form words. Just sound, like air passing through teeth, like a voice trying to imitate speech without knowing how. I stumbled backwards so fast I hit the counter. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. The floor went silent again, but the damage was done. Something was under my house. No, not something. It was under my house. That night, the tapping returned. Not random, not frantic, intentional. It moved slowly beneath the floor, traveling room to room, as though mapping the space, learning how my home breathed, how it shifted, where it creaked the loudest, every few minutes. The tapping paused directly beneath my feet, as if waiting to see if I responded, and every time, I stood still, barely daring to exhale, convinced that any reaction would invite it upward. Around midnight, the tapping stopped completely, not faded, not drifted away, just cut off, and the silence that followed was somehow worse. I barely slept, drifting in and out of shallow dreams until the sun finally washed the walls with a gray, lifeless glow. The world outside looked normal, ordinary even, and for a moment, I let myself believe the nightmare had ended, that whatever haunted me had grown bored and vanished. But fear has a way of reminding you it hasn't gone far. Just after sunrise, when the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, I heard something new, something delicate and impossible. Breathing, not below the floor this time. Inside the walls, slow, steady inhales, then exhale, like someone resting their forehead against the drywall. Listening to me move, I walked from room to room, refusing to get close, refusing to try and pinpoint the exact spot. Because what if the sound moved along with me? What if every time I paused, the breathing paused too? I know how insane that sounds, but when you live long enough with the unknown, you stop dismissing impossible thoughts, and you start fearing the reasonable ones. For days, the pattern continued, tapping beneath me, breathing around me, a presence shifting through places nothing living should fit into. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped letting myself fall into any moment where my guard slipped, because the thing I feared most wasn't the noises themselves. It was the thought that it was getting closer, that the walls, the floors, the spaces between them were no longer barriers. That soon, it would be inside the same room as me. And then one night, it was raining. One of those Appalachian storms where thunder rolls low and heavy, like mountains grieving something ancient. I was sitting in the living room, lights off, listening to the storm wash over the house. Rain had always calmed me, but that night, the rain sounded different, rhythmic, patterned, like someone walking in circles around the house, stepping in puddles with careful precision. At first, I thought it was just paranoia twisting natural sounds, but the footsteps grew clearer, sloshing, steady, unhurried, coming closer to the windows, closer to the walls, and suddenly, too close, like they weren't outside anymore, like water was dripping from something standing just on the other side of the living room. I held my breath, lightning cracked, illuminating the room for the briefest moment, and that's when I saw it, a figure. Not solid, not fully formed, standing in the corner where shadow never quite left. Even in daylight, its shape was tall, but wrong. like someone stretched the outline of a person beyond natural proportions. Its head tilted slightly. Listening, the room fell dark again, leaving nothing but the echo of my heartbeat. There was no tapping now, no breathing in the walls, no shifting beneath the floor, because it wasn't beneath me anymore. It was with me, standing there, waiting, watching. I didn't run. I couldn't. Fear rooted me to the floor. The air thickened, pressing against my chest until I could barely breathe. I sensed movement, not footsteps, not physical displacement, but something more subtle, like the temperature shifting around its form, like the shadows adjusting to make space for it. And then it did something that still freezes my blood even now. It spoke, not in words, not in sentences, just a single, low sound, drawn out, trembling, as if mimicking a voice it didn't understand. A sound that was almost my name, almost. My knees nearly buckled. Tears blurred my vision. My mind screamed at me to look away, but terror held me locked in place. My throat tightened until I could barely swallow. I whispered, barely audible, "What do you want?" The shape twitched, a subtle motion, like someone reacting to a recognition they hadn't expected. And then, it leaned forward, not physically. The darkness around it folded toward me. A bending of space, a pulling. Gravity felt wrong. Like the whole room began tilting toward that impossible center point. My vision flickered, my breath hitched. I felt the sensation of being observed more deeply than ever before, like its attention was no longer just watching me but peeling through me. Then lightning struck again. The room flashed white, and the figure was gone, vanished, leaving nothing but the sound of the storm and the distant echo of that half-formed voice. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, but I made a mistake. The worst mistake yet. I started trying to understand it. I took notes, recorded sounds, measured tapping intervals, mapped out where in the house it moved. Desperation disguised itself as logic. I told myself that if I could understand it, I could stop it. That was when things escalated, because nothing draws the attention of the unknown like being studied. The next incident happened 3 days later. I was reviewing audio recordings when my laptop glitched, static swallowing the playback, distorting the file into something warped and broken. Through the distortion, I heard it, my own voice, whispering, "Stop." Only, I never said that. Not in any recording, not out loud. The room felt colder instantly. Then the tapping began beneath the floor, fast, erratic, desperate, not mapping, not exploring, trying to get my attention. The breathing followed next, deep, rattling inhalations, traveling inside the walls like a massive pair of lungs drawing breath. I stood up slowly, because suddenly, I understood something terrible. It wasn't haunting my house, it was trying to get out. Something beneath the floor, something behind the walls, something I had been ignoring, wasn't the presence itself. It was where the presence had been trapped, and now it realized that I understood the one truth I never wanted to learn. It didn't follow me home to watch me. It followed me because it needed me, because I could hear it, because I noticed it, because I acknowledged it, and acknowledgement is a door. A door it learned to open from the inside. The storm that night was louder than ever, drowning out the world outside with thunder that shook the windows. But even the storm couldn't mask what I heard at 3:11 a.m., that cursed moment when night feels deepest. The floorboards shifted, the walls expanded with a long, groaning creak, and something inside the house, something formless, hungry, patient, finally stepped free of whatever had been holding it back. I felt it behind me before I could turn. A presence, a shape without form, a shadow without light. Not beneath the house, not behind the walls, standing directly behind me, breathing slow, heavy, human in shape, but not in nature. The house fell silent, and in that silence, in a voice almost like my own, it whispered, "Now you hear me." I don't remember standing up. I don't remember turning. I don't remember the moment my mind decided to look at the thing behind me. All I remember is the sound, a low, trembling inhalation that didn't just echo through the room. It echoed through me. The voice, my almost voice, still quivered in the air between us. Now you hear me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Fear wasn't an emotion anymore. It was a landscape, an entire world, and I was trapped inside it. But the worst part wasn't what I saw or what I sensed. The worst part was what I understood. It had learned. It had adapted. It had shaped itself around the only thing it needed. My awareness, acknowledgement, was a doorway, and I'd left it wide open. The house fell absolutely silent, even the storm. Ferocious moments ago felt smothered, as if the world outside had been muted by something older than weather. I forced myself to speak. "What are you?" My voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. But the creature responded instantly, a shiver of movement in the dark, like shadows adjusting around a form too hollow to hold a shape. It didn't answer with words. Instead, the floor beneath us creaked. Once, twice, not footsteps, a heartbeat. Mine. No, hers. Who's hers? The question struck me so fast it felt like someone else had placed it inside my skull. A memory surfaced. The old Appalachian stories about lost echoes, voices trapped in the mountains that mimicked the living to lure them deeper. Stories no one took seriously anymore. But this wasn't an echo. It was a reflection of me. Something forming itself around my presence, my voice, my fear. Something becoming clearer the more attention I gave it. And standing there, with that shadow breathing behind me, I realized with absolute certainty, it wasn't haunting my house. It was preparing to replace me. A sharp cold swept down my spine. The temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged in the air. For a moment, I thought the storm windows had blown open, until I noticed the fog wasn't drifting upward or outward. It was drifting toward the shape behind me, like it was inhaling it, eating my breath, taking it for itself. I stepped back instinctively. The shadow stepped forward, not physically, but the air around it moved, bending toward me like gravity itself had shifted. "No," I whispered. "You can't have me." The lights flickered, once, twice, then died, leaving me in a darkness so complete it felt alive. The thing's presence grew clearer in the blackness, not by sight, but by pressure. As if its awareness pressed gently against the back of my skull. Thunder rumbled far away, swallowed by something deeper than the storm, and then, tap. The sound came from the floorboards at my feet. Tap, tap, slow, measured, communicating something. Then the breathing began again, louder this time, filling the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Not one voice, but many, layering over each other like the echoes of unseen mouths pressed against the wood. I covered my ears, but the sound didn't fade. It vibrated inside my bones. The shadow leaned closer. The whole room seemed to tilt toward it. And then it spoke again, not in my almost voice this time. Something older, something deeper, something that knew me. "You opened the way." My breath froze. I didn't remember opening anything, didn't remember choosing anything, but the creature responded to my panic as though reading it directly. "Awareness," it said, "is a path." I backed away, but there was no away. Every step returned me to the same spot. I was moving, but the room wasn't. Or the room was moving with me. I wasn't sure anymore. When lightning finally split the sky, the flash lit the room for half a second, long enough for me to see what stood behind me. Not a figure, not even a shape. A shadow with no source, a gap, a hollow, an absence of everything except intention. It leaned forward, and though its face had no features, I knew exactly where it was looking. At me, into me. Something pressed against my thoughts, gentle but forceful, like fingers testing the grain of wood before carving. It didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to fit me, like trying on a shirt. or a skin? My voice shook. Why me? For the first time, the answer came clear. Because you listened. It was so simple. So devastatingly simple. All the nights I strained to hear it. All the moments I tried to understand it. All the time I spent acknowledging its presence. I had invited it, trained it, fed it. It had grown on my attention the way fire grows on air. And now, it was ready. The pressure shifted, suddenly, violently. A wave of dread slammed through the room, bending the shadows inward. The lights flickered once, groaned, and sputtered back on, but dim, weak, and the thing was still there, but different now. Sharper, clearer, more solid. Like light had given it edges it wasn't supposed to have. It stepped closer, and I swear I felt the air compress around its movement. The whisper returned, scraping across my mind like frost. I hear you too. That broke something inside me. A dam, a wall, I can't describe it. But the terror that followed wasn't a rising panic. It was a calm dread, a cold, sinking certainty. It had listened to me the way I listened to it. It had learned me. It had shaped itself from me. And now, it could speak with me, or as me. The final moment came quietly. No thunder, no flickering lights, no violent shudder of the house. Just a stillness so total it bowed the air. The shadow reached toward me, not with hands, but with darkness thickening like ink poured into water. When it touched my arm, there was no pain, there was recognition. My thoughts blurred, my heartbeat slowed, my vision faded at the edges, like someone else was gently taking the controls. The last thing I felt was something sliding into the space behind my eyes, a presence settling into me the way a person settles into a chair that already has the shape of their body worn into it. Then, a whisper, soft as breath against my ear. You won't return. Not a threat, a promise, a truth. And then everything went black. I don't know how long I was gone. Minutes, hours, days. But eventually, I woke up. I was standing in my living room. Lights on, storm gone, floor dry, wall silent. Everything looked normal, peaceful, except I could hear breathing, not in the walls, not in the floor, in my own heartbeat, like something was breathing with it, inside me. And when I spoke, testing my voice, checking if it was still mine, my words came out perfectly normal, except for the echo underneath, the echo that wasn't me. It whispered the final truth I've been too afraid to say out loud. It didn't replace me. It didn't possess me. It became me. And now, I'm not sure which one of us is telling you this story, or which one of us is still listening.